Hello, everyone, and welcome to the 2022 TEDxDrexelU conference. I'm so excited that you're all here. My name is Christina, and I'm one of the curators.
Hi guys, my name is Ubaid, and I'm also one of the curators for TEDxDrexelU. Since the shock of the coronavirus pandemic, we've found ourselves in an ever-changing world. Around us, we find ourselves in global inflation, which threatens our economic outlook, climate change that continues to show its force, and threats to democracy, which include misinformation and wars.
Meanwhile, as citizens, we search for a life beyond the pandemic, embracing an era of new technology, from hybrid learning, hybrid working, virtual currencies, to metaverses. We're making historical advances in science, from the development of treatments of seemingly incurable diseases to the using of artificial intelligence to create self-driving cars. The world as we know it continues to work together in the face of adversity to make these advancements possible.
As we go through life, it's hard to be mindful of all these changes. Yet every single day, we step into this seemingly random and ever-changing reality. Our interactions with such reality become our life experiences, and the lessons learned shape who we are. But some of these experiences are more pivotal and significant to our journey than others, and are hence called momentous. Ladies and gentlemen, the theme of our conference is momentous.
Today, we wish to start conversations about ideas that force us to look inwards and reflect about our journeys, to understand ourselves through challenges of this ever-changing world, and to hopefully find the tools to help us become more authentic, resilient, and intentional about who we plan to be. Last year, as a team, we thought of a theme for our conference. We thought of a lot of ideas that could be reflective of the current state of the world.
We chose Momentous because we believe this theme invites us to look inside to understand our lives, especially at a time where we're cluttered and bombarded with headlines of the changing world order. Today, we will explore the expanse of the meaning behind momentous. What momentous means to you might be different from what it means to the people sitting around you. This is an opportunity for you to see how the ideas shared in our conference will resonate with the people around you. Please take full advantage of this conference to expand your point of views and engage in meaningful conversations.
Before we begin, we have a few housekeeping announcements. Firstly, photos and videos are not allowed during the conference. Instead, we ask that you please keep that for the networking session at the end. We also ask that you please put your phones on silent mode. We encourage you to limit your use of technology to fully engage in this conference. We also have an open seat policy. This means that after each session is complete, please plan on taking all of your belongings with you because when you return, you will likely have a new seat. Use this opportunity to meet new people and hopefully make new friends.
Throughout the conference, we've scheduled breaks. In these breaks, we request that you please leave the hall and proceed to the lobby. In the lobby, our speakers have prepared special workshops for you to engage with. Each session, starting from now, will start promptly on time. We are 30 minutes behind schedule, as I mentioned. The times will be adjusted. But I recommend that you guys arrive to the hall before time, as we will not allow people to enter during the talks, but we will allow in between the talks. We have a lunch session at 11:35, so now that's gonna be moved 30 minutes forward. We will serve lunch in the lobby. Please feel free to enjoy that. However, if you are looking for other options, there are multiple restaurants nearby. If you don't know where to go, please approach one of our team members who will be wearing a staff badge like this, and they'll be happy to share any recommendations with you. Now, before we get started, please enjoy this video message from TED.
Welcome to something special. Welcome to TEDx. This TEDx event is part of a global conversation that takes place every day in every corner of the world. In schools, in theaters, in workplaces, even in prisons. people gather to hear the best ideas bubbling up in their communities. More than 3,000 TEDx events are held every year in 170 countries. It's a remarkable thing. TEDx events are self-organized under a license from TED, a non-profit organization devoted to discovering and sharing powerful ideas in the form of TED Talks. It's not TED itself, but your local TEDx team of volunteers that has done all the work to put on today's event, including booking all of the speakers. It's this team's ideas, dedication, and time that have made this possible. We really hope today's program sparks an exciting conversation. This is a day for curiosity and for skepticism, for inspiration and for action. The more you enter into it, the more you will take out. And now, on with the show. Welcome to something special.
The first session for today is called Action. TEDxDrexelU is meant to be experienced in its entirety. We have 3 sections. No 2 of them are alike.
Every journey begins with an action. This action occurs by gathering information in order to make an informed choice. Our first speaker is a board-certified specialist in sports dietetics and a professor at Drexel University. Please welcome on stage Dr. Nyree Dardarian.
I ate at a fast food restaurant for 30 days straight. And I'm a registered dietitian. Ironic, right? What if I told you that eating at a fast food restaurant for 30 days straight taught me 3 secrets to living a more holistically healthier and better lifestyle? It did. Many people might want to live a longer and healthy life. Some might even want to live to the age of 100, like the centenarians who live in Icolari, Greece, Nicoya, Costa Rica, or Sardinia, Italy. These regions of the world are known as blue zones. People who live in the blue zones, they're part of a tribe. They have similar responsibilities in the world. They come together and they live with each other in these cultures that evolved to let them live very long and healthy lives. Much of what I learned from eating at a fast food restaurant for 30 days corresponded with the eating behaviors that the people in these blue zones practice. For example, the meals. Meals are shared. Meals are an experience more than just food that is just there to satisfy a hunger craving or perhaps an emotional state. In addition to that, meals are shared. This is where technology is put down. The simplicity of being in the same room with somebody and enjoying their company is the bigger experience. Food is kind of like along for the ride of this bigger, greater experience. Okay, so this got me thinking. Is it really fast food that is bad for you and leads to poor health? Or is it the fast food experience? Because the experience of fast food is often laced with feelings of judgment, perhaps feelings of shame and restrictiveness. Like some people, they avoid fast food at all costs, and others, they might hide and eat it in their car, right? So this is far from mindfulness. This experience, you might have actually had one of these experiences where you find a tightly rolled up fast food wrapper, maybe in your car or somebody else's car, all to hide what many people in this world do every single day: eat at fast food restaurants. So this got me to thinking, fast food, it's here to stay. Wouldn't I rather learn how to live with it in harmony than avoid it at all costs? Okay, so I set out to take a little bit of a deeper look at all of this. And what I really dug into is what makes people so afraid of eating fast food. So we have this experience and people go and they go to the fast food, they might go through the drive-through, they might run through it quickly, and they're not really paying attention to what is going on around them. They might eat very quickly, and then they might hide that evidence, like I had said earlier. So this actually, all of these behaviors, these are forms of restrictiveness. And eating food in general, or eating fast food in general, we don't want these feelings of restriction around food. We want to have a better relationship with food, not just this restrictiveness. Now, we all know there are many restrictive diets out there. You might have heard of intermittent fasting, the ketogenic diet, the grapefruit diet if you're old enough. Thanks, Hollywood. Yeah, so all of these behaviors, all of these restrictiveness, you know, it ends up really causing harm on the human body. Okay, so it is our responsibility as the consumer, as the person here to set the barriers for what is the availability and the frequency of the food that you're eating. That means that if you're gonna go fast food, or you're gonna offer someone in your family fast food, it doesn't mean that that is the only option. It really means that it's one option in the grand scheme of things. Okay, so you might want me to backtrack a little bit here. And I'm gonna backtrack to eating fast food for 30 days. How did it all start? How did I get here? Well, it all started on a cocktail napkin. Isn't that where all great ideas begin? So on this cocktail napkin, oh wait, I have it right here. On this cocktail napkin, with a bunch of colleagues of mine, we created a pyramid, the hierarchy of eating at restaurants. And what do you think was at the bottom of this hierarchy? Fast food. And at the very top of this was the epitome of eating out, and that was 3 Michelin star restaurants. Okay, so we knew that there's a gap here. And off this page jumped some questions at me that I really wanted to answer. And the questions were, 1, when did the perception of fast food change in the United States? And 2, what can I do to help people make better decisions at the drive-thru? Okay? So there was somebody, a famous documentary, you might all know it, where somebody ate at fast food for 30 days straight. And their results were really, really bad at the end of those 30 days. Well, this person didn't practice 2 things that I think really make an impact on eating behavior and decisions, which is freedom of choice and knowledge. So I was looking at this paper and I got deeper thinking, what do I need to do? And it dawned on me, I need to make my own 30-day documentary. So I thought about this, and I thought, I'm just gonna drop this over here. So I thought about this 30-day documentary and what it would look like, and then I thought, I don't really wanna eat fast food for 30 days, so I'm just gonna bag it. However, there was a caveat here, and the caveat was that my students already knew about my idea, and they were really excited for this. So when I thought I was gonna drop it, they were saying, Professor Dardarian, when are you gonna start? Professor Dardarian, what variables are we gonna measure? Professor Dardarian, what do you think the outcomes are gonna be? You know, all the good questions that good college students ask. So I thought, all right, I think we're gonna do this. So we laid out an experiment and we laid out the ground rules. And we divided this into 2 different phases, this experiment. There was phase 1, that was called before fast food, and phase 2, during fast food. So each of these phases, I had to document and journal every day everything that I ate, any type of physical activity I was involved in, and you know, I got on a roll. So for my first 30 days, and before I started all of this, I also wanted to have a baseline of all of my body composition, really. So called my doctor in, and he ordered a bunch of blood work. We got a full metabolic panel, lipid panel, cardio biomarkers. We did blood pressure, you know, all of these things. And then in addition to that, I went to my own lab at Drexel where we have a DEXA scan. So I was able to measure then how much lean body mass, muscle, and fat mass, fat, I had all over my body and told me exactly where. It's really a beautiful picture. And of course, what my weight is. So as I'm talking about this journey that I'm about to set out on, people ask me a bunch of questions like, are you gonna get sick? How much weight do you think you're gonna gain? Is your cholesterol gonna go up? I mean, these were all questions I was thinking, and I'm sure you're all thinking them as well, like what's gonna happen with all of this? But here we go, I set off, I didn't know the answers, and these were what we were gonna figure out. So I documented everything I ate, those first 30 days, found out that I was eating about 1,800 calories every day. My physical activity pretty much remained the same throughout these first 30 days. 60% of my diet was coming from carbohydrates, just like it should according to the USDA dietary guidelines. All my blood work came back, I was healthy. Everything within normal limits, my body weight also in a healthy range. So I was in a groove. Then those 30 days ended, and we went into the during fast food. During fast food phase started on a Monday, like all diets start on a Monday, right? So I go into the fast food restaurant of choice, and I was ready to place my first order. And it did feel kind of awkward, I have to admit. But I walked up there and I placed my order, and I took it, and I said to myself, is this really what I'm gonna do for the next 30 days? Is this really comfortable? And I felt kind of uncomfortable, and I understood what other people feel going through the fast food drive-through, which it was at this point, I was driving through. So, but what I figured out here is, what you might be wondering is, this was the moment when I thought, what am I gonna order? And how am I gonna order so that I still feel healthy? And this was when I learned my first secret, secret number one. And secret number one is make your own order. You know, that famous documentary film writer that we just talked about? When he would order at the drive-thru, he would order one of those pre-made packages, like you might all know as number 3. So number 3, you might say, I'll take a number 3, and I'll take a number 3 with a large Coke and a fries. But I didn't do that. I looked at every menu item, and I thought, what am I going to do to make this meet my needs so that I would get my right nutrient composition and also caloric, meet my goals? Make your own order. So when I would pull up to the drive-thru, I ordered one day a breakfast sandwich. A breakfast sandwich with no meat, no sauce. Make your own order. I would order kid-sized fries. I would get water instead of soda. And you know that famous sandwich? 2 all-beef patties, special sauce, lettuce, cheese, pickles, onions on a sesame seed bun? Well, I would remove one of the all-beef patties, and I would remove part of the sesame seed bun, a mini version. All the flavor, not all the calories. Make your own order. So that same day, I ate my breakfast, and about 2 hours later, I thought to myself, I'm kind of hungry, I think. And did I eat? I don't really remember. Did I eat? I don't remember if I had breakfast or not. Then that's when I realized secret number 2, mindfulness. See, going through the drive-thru, it's really mindless eating. It's like your brain is on autopilot and you're just going through the motions. I didn't practice any mindfulness. Mindfulness is an important component to everything that you do in your day, not just eating. But how can you be mindful at fast food, right? It's kind of easy. You can go inside. You can sit down. You can pay attention to the food that you're about to eat. So secret number 2 was being mindful when you're eating. And that is one of the things that people in the blue zones do. They are being mindful when they're sitting down together and enjoying a meal and paying attention to their surroundings and the food that they're eating. Okay, so moving on. One day, during my next phase of 30 days of during fast food, I needed a place to work, to do some work. And usually I might go to a coffee shop and log into their Wi-Fi, but I thought I might as well try my fast food place since I have to eat there anyway this morning. So I was gonna go inside. Little did I know that this was going to be a life-changing experience. I got my laptop, I went inside the fast food restaurant, and I found a great table that had an outlet, great, plugged my laptop in, and I logged into the Wi-Fi. And it was hot. It was a good Wi-Fi, strong, very strong. So I sat down, I started working, and I looked up, and I saw a group of men walk in. They looked like highway workers, everyone was in uniform, and they sat down at what looked like they owned the table. And this was their place. This was their seat. Another person came in, sat down in his assigned seat, and they had their morning. And I was intrigued by this. Okay, well, half hour later, they all left, and in comes another group of people, the retired crew. 8:30, they came in, and they all took their assigned seats. They did not seem at all fazed by this fast food stigma. You know why? Because they knew secret number 3. So day 1 goes by, and I am intrigued. And the one woman, she looked up at me and she said, hi. I said, oh, hi. Well, what are you doing? Well, what I wanted to say is, well, I'm psychologically evaluating your eating behavior right now. But I refrained and I just said, schoolwork, okay. I watched them, they left. The next day I was so intrigued that I went back. Today, enter highway workers. Someone waved to me. Hi, great, I felt good about that. They left, enter retired crew. And they said, you want to join me? I was like, yeah, I really do, thanks. So I did. I went and I sat with them. And I listened. And I was so engaged in the conversation. And that's where I learned secret number 3, community. I felt like I was part of a group. They knew secret number 3. You know, some people might want to feel this by joining a sorority or a country club. And this was the same thing, without that high astronomical cost, of course. They found community. The centenarians in Sardinia, they are architects of community. They know that being part of something bigger adds to life. It makes you feel like you are part of something bigger. And that day, I felt like I was part of something bigger. It felt really good. So these 3 secrets to eating at fast food. Now, I did not eat at fast food restaurants to make you all eat at fast food restaurants, okay? That was not my goal. My goal was to destigmatize eating at fast food restaurants. So if you do eat there, you don't feel guilty for eating there. So what happened to me? You wanna know my results? 30 days later, all my lab values were normal. My body weight remained exactly the same. My body composition remained exactly the same. I still ate 1,800 calories a day, and my exercise stayed exactly the same. Now, I know that my results, I can only say that they're mine. Everybody might not have those same results. But I can say that the freedom of knowledge And the freedom of choice and the power of knowledge together can make an impact in everything that you do. So when you go to fast food restaurants, stay rooted, stay grounded, be engaged in moderation, mindfulness, and community. I hope I saved you all from feeling guilty when you eat at a fast food restaurant. Spread the word.
Thank you so much, Nyree, for that thought-provoking insight on fast food. It definitely gave us some food for thought. I'd like to introduce our next speaker, Chief Data Scientist, #1 selling best author, and the industry's leader in the podcast, Super Data Science. Please join me in welcoming Jon Krohn.
Hi. Nice, this thing's on. And how do I see my slides? Nice. This is Jeanne Calment. She was born in France in 1875. When she was 1 year old, the telephone was invented. When she was 4 years old, the light bulb was patented. When she was 9, the steam turbine was invented. At the age of 20, we had wireless communication for the first time. The Zeppelin and the Wright brothers with fixed-wing air also both happened in her 20s. Essentially, all modern medicine, except general anesthesia, happened in Jeanne's lifetime. So X-rays were discovered when she was in her 20s. When she was in her 50s, we discovered the antibiotic properties of penicillin. This is crazy. It means that up until she was 50 years old, you could have died from a cut. And once we had this discovery of penicillin, everything changes overnight. This discovery changes the quality of life for humans for the rest of time. In terms of information technology, it wasn't until Jeanne's 60s that we had the first programmable computer. And then in her 70s, we invented the transistor that has allowed computers to become smaller and cheaper and faster in the years since. When she was 90, we came up with email, and at the time of Jeanne's 100th birthday, we came up with the internet. Jeanne died in 1997, 122 years young, making her the oldest person to ever have been recorded to have lived. In her lifetime, she saw incredible innovation, and that innovation corresponds to complete overhauls in the way that humans live and the quality of our life. So for example, 200 years ago, the vast majority of people on Earth were hungry every day. Today, only 1 in 10 people on the planet live in extreme poverty. Likewise, 200 years ago, almost everyone on the planet was illiterate, and now almost everyone on the planet is literate. In terms of lifespan, when Jeanne Calment was born, the average life expectancy in Western Europe was 38 years, just 38 years. By the time she died, that more than doubled to 77. So technology changes rapidly in one person's lifespan, and that change leads to enormous changes in the way that humans live their lives. So, so today we have about 100 million people born on Earth every year. Given that lifespans have continued to extend since Jean Calment's death, we can reasonably anticipate that one of these 100 million people born today will live as long as Jean Calment did. And so that child will live into the 2140s or beyond. What change will this child bear witness to? And how will that change impact the life of humans? So there are reasons, in my belief, that technological progress is accelerating. So the incredible change that Jean witnessed, that I just went over, that is nothing compared to what will happen in the coming decades. So one of the key drivers behind this change is that there are more brains on the planet than ever before. And each of those brains has more time than it's ever had to think cognitively about things as opposed to, say, tilling the fields. So we have way more brains, way more thinking time per brain, and those brains are all connected. Well, most of them are connected in real time over the internet, such that if there's a new paper published, a new line of code is created, that is uploaded into servers online, and you can access them in real time. So lots of brains, thinking lots, and sharing that information with all the other thinking brains. So that in and of itself gives this huge tailwind to innovation, this accelerating pace of technological change. But there is another wild card outside of human intelligence that is going to make an even bigger difference in the coming decades, and that's artificial intelligence. So AI algorithms, they typically are trained on lots of data, and we have exponentially more sensors collecting data on the planet as years go by. So your wearable devices, your smartphone, self-driving cars, industrial sensors, all of these are propagating around the planet and collecting more and more and more data. So lots of data for training our AI algorithms, and storing those data is becoming exponentially cheaper as years go on. Not only is storing the data becoming cheaper, but computing with the data is becoming cheaper as well. So we have way more data all the time. About every 18 months, the amount of data on the planet doubles, and computing with all of those data is getting cheaper and cheaper and cheaper, so we can build more and more powerful AI models. I'm an expert in a particular branch of AI called deep learning. And so to give you a little sense of how deep learning works, I have up on this slide a schematic of an artificial neural network, also known as a deep neural network or a deep learning system. And so it consists of a few dozen artificial neurons that are inspired by your biological neurons in your brain. So all of the white boxes here are these artificial brain cells. And what we're trying to do in this diagram is we have taught an algorithm how to recognize the spiral shape. So it can detect whether there are orange dots or blue dots based on their location alone. And so the first layer on the far left, there's 8 of the white boxes on the far left. Those are artificial neurons. The first layer, they all detect straight lines at specific orientations, just like the first brain cells in your brain that receive information from your eyes. Those can pass information to a second layer that can combine those straight lines into curves and corners. Then we have a third layer that can make even more complex abstractions on those curves and corners until we get to the 2 artificial neurons on the far right, and you can see that they have a detailed spiral shape that allows this deep learning system to have learned the spiral pattern. Now, learning that spiral pattern, it's relatively simple. So we only needed a couple of dozen artificial neurons to do it. But thanks to the abundance of sensors and data storage and compute power that we have, and that's exponentially increasing as years go on, we can train much, much, much larger AI systems. So the biggest AI systems today don't have a couple dozen neurons like this, they have trillions of them. And instead of just having 4 layers, they have hundreds of layers. And so this allows an incredible amount of nuance and power in these AI systems, and it means that AI systems are overcoming human capability on more and more human capabilities every day. So just 10 years ago, for the first time, we had enough data and cheap enough compute to allow deep learning models to work in a broad range of applications, just 10 years ago. And now, they are ubiquitous. You interact with deep learning models dozens of times a day. When you look at your phone and it recognizes your face, a deep learning model is doing that. When you speak to your phone and it converts your audio into text, a deep learning system is doing that. When you do a web search and you find instantly what you were looking for, that web search was guided by deep learning. So as we have way more data and much cheaper compute in the coming decades, how is that going to impact our human lives? Things are going to accelerate dramatically. So for climate change, for example, today, AI systems allow energy to be much more efficiently allocated in an electrical grid, so we waste less energy. In the future, AI systems will help us design better climate technologies, like more efficient solar panels, and AI is even playing a leading role today in helping us achieve nuclear fusion. I earlier spoke about lots of brains on the planet. Those brains are going to want to eat. And so we're going to need to feed billions more people in the decades to come, and AI is going to play a big role in that as well. So AI today already is helping with the automation of farming. So machine vision systems can help with agriculture and have fewer hands tilling the fields, so we're more efficient with the manual labor that we have in the fields. In the future, AI will play a key role in increasing crop yields further, in engineering plants so that they have more nutritional value, so that they are hardier to the climate change that is coming. And so enormous opportunity for AI in agriculture as well. And then finally for healthcare, today AI systems have already overtaken expert radiologists on being able to identify tumors in a lot of radiological scans. AI systems today also are far better at predicting the molecular structure of biological compounds than humans could ever imagine they'd be able to do. In the decades that are coming, AI systems will also personalize medicine. They will help us predict pandemics. AI will help us to design pharmaceuticals. They'll take care of the elderly. So there is an enormous amount of application areas for AI in medicine and health. And so not only will lifespans continue to extend, but the quality of our lives into old age will improve as well. Now, not everything is rosy about AI. I don't want to give you that impression. So even today, AI-driven news feeds are polarizing politics all over the world. AI systems today, a major shortcoming of them is that they are largely trained on data created by humans. And humans have unhelpful stereotypes. So for example, AI systems today are more likely to think that it's acceptable for a male to be a firefighter and a nurse to be female than the other way around. So this is a problem that we are only beginning to tackle. There are also racial prejudices in today's AI systems. So the surveillance systems that can recognize faces are better able to accurately recognize lighter-skinned faces than darker-skinned faces, which means that darker-skinned people are more likely to be erroneously identified by these surveillance systems and wrongfully arrested. So there are problems with AI today, but there are even bigger potential problems with AI in the future, existential problems for our race and for our entire species. And that is because people and creatures that are more intelligent than others on this planet tend to not be very kind to those that are less intelligent. So chimpanzees are only a tiny little bit intelligent than humans, a tiny little bit less intelligent than humans, and yet we can imprison them, we can kill them, and they have no ability to control us or impact our society. The AI systems that are coming in the decades that are ahead of us could be far more powerful, far more intelligent than humans. So there's an event that could occur in our lifetimes. As we collect enough data, as we build big enough AI systems, these could become more intelligent than us. We call that an event called the singularity. And at that point, these algorithms might not be a little bit more intelligent, like we are to a chimp. They might be so much more intelligent than us that we will be like an insect to them. And you don't think about it at all when you kill a fly, when you step on a bug. It might be the same for an AI system and humans. So big potential existential risk ahead. But my talk for you today is one of optimism. So while there are risks with AI today and in the future, we can do things, you can do things to help mitigate the issues. So think back to that firefighter example. If a system is recommending people for jobs, it should not prefer people that are male for a firefighter role than are female. And although the historical data might suggest that males more often have that job, we know that that is not the correct thing that an algorithm should be outputting. And so we can put extra effort in to avoid these unwanted biases in our algorithms. So as a user of any AI algorithm today, you should be wary of results because of how those results are potentially influenced by human decisions of the past. And so if somebody's selling you an AI system, you should be sure to be pressing them to be giving you evidence that their system is not propagating unwanted biases. So that's the first thing you can do. Another thing you can do is you can vote for or lobby your local politicians to be funding retraining programs for people whose jobs are displaced by AI and automation. So while studies suggest that automation, including AI, creates more net jobs than it destroys, certain careers are definitely negatively impacted and displaced. And so we need to be funding programs to be retraining those people who are displaced so that they can take advantage of the new opportunities that automation and AI create. My third takeaway for you is to consider getting involved or supporting AI safety research. So some people think that in the coming decades, the most impactful career choice you could make is to be an AI safety expert. And so the image here is designed to connotate the steps of intelligence. And so as we create AI systems that ascend these steps of intelligence and potentially eventually overtake our intellectual capabilities, we need to set up guardrails or handrails in the image that try to align AI with social causes with humans so that they don't just squish us like a bug. So back to Jean Calment from the beginning of this talk. She witnessed unbelievable technological change in her lifetime. Try to imagine that from her perspective. As a young Jean Calment, with all of these innovations that happened, could she have possibly imagined that we'd be splitting atoms, that we'd have mobile phones and laptop computers by the time that she died? I doubt that. And so now, with these deep learning systems, which have only become possible since her death, that we've only, in the last decade, had enough data and cheap enough compute to be training these deep learning AI systems that are now dramatically changing the world. Back to my original question about how a child born today who lives as long as Jean Calment, how can that child predict what's going to happen? Well, I gave you a taste today across medicine, agriculture, and climate change, how at least in the coming decades things could change. But as our deep learning systems, as our AI systems become more and more advanced, I can't see beyond the next few decades, and I'm not sure what's going to happen. But if you take some of the steps that I suggested today, you can help us create an AI future, a technological future, a level of abundance and prosperity that we can't even imagine today. And by the way, all of the illustrations above the timeline, those were created by a machine. So a state-of-the-art AI algorithm. And it doesn't necessarily, so I gave it various text prompts, and they didn't always turn out incredible. So here's one, I said, cartoon of a robot building a futuristic home, and this is what it gave me. In a few years, this will be doing an incredible job of that kind of image. So stay tuned and look out for that radically abundant future.
Thank you, Dr. Krohn and Dr. Dardarian, for these amazing talks. What a great way to start off the conference. In addition to these talks, we'll have a series of performances. Our first performance is Spoken Words, performed by Drexel Maya students, which is a poetry group on campus. Please join us in welcoming the poets. Gonna take that off. Ooh. So I'm gonna be reading a piece called 2301 Market Street. 1:02 a.m., 60 degrees. The fog rolls by me in sheets, unrelenting, softer than I thought. Through it, I can just see a blur of electric light, the edge of a skyline. 1:03 a.m., 60 degrees. I wrap myself in my sweater, adjust my headphones around my ears. I will go inside when my phone dies, I tell myself. Does that sound reasonable? 1:04 a.m., 60 degrees. Tucked into the porch of my building, the wind brushes past me. You would like this moment, I think. There's nothing spectacular about it. It is late. Arch Street has gone quiet. 1:05 a.m., 60 degrees. Though I can breathe tonight, perhaps for the first time in days, there is something monumental to that. To the way my shoulders have lightened, in the softness around my eyes, in the careless way I have slung myself across this chair. 1:06 a.m., 60 degrees. As monumental as the wind rolling off the river, as the misting rain it blows against my skin, as the glow of the moon through the fog, which billows past me in sheets, cooler than I thought. 1:07 a.m., 59 degrees. Thank you very much.
Hi everyone, my name is Alessandra Cabrera, and I will be reading my poem called A Patchwork of Miracles. My mother had a spiritual connection with Cleopatra. I could never describe what she meant, yet I knew exactly how she felt. The feeling of knowing someone without having even met them. That sensation comes to me awash in cold waves. I felt it once in an Alaskan art gallery, staring at the woven handiwork, a jacket sewn from salmon skins, the fossilized ivory of whale bones, and Aleutian statues made from driftwood. Each of them a testament to those who once walked this earth. The sight of these artifacts beckoned me forth to join the singing choir of the universe. Art has a beautiful way of transferring us into the liminal space between the past and the present. That is why we walk into museums and feel an overwhelming rush of familiarity when examining the lives of those who came before, because they are in us just as we are in them. They are our past, and we are their future. That is why there is meaning in the smallest signals from the universe, like in hearing the same word again and again, or a magnolia petal dropping on your shoulder, landing firmly as if to catch your attention. But when you look up, you realize that there isn't a single tree of its kind in sight. You see, miracles don't happen all at once. They are a summation of tiny miracles, which add up moment by moment, creating an intricate tapestry of momentous life events which shape us into the people we are today. The universe is a patient teacher. It will keep sending signals until we are ready to receive them. And we will know we have come face to face with a miracle, because it will clasp our hands tight, greet us like an old friend saying, "I've been waiting for you." Thank you.
Hello, I'm Matthew Desposito, and I'll be reading the poem Gifted. Gifted. I sat on the floor, probably, building an obscure structure with some Legos. Maybe a castle. A teacher or proctor, faceless and deprived, talks about something with my parents. They sit on these colorful cushioned benches, building blocks of their own. I begin to distrust them as the words test and memory melt into the valley of my tongue like snowflakes. They don't stick, but stay, as suddenly the teacher asked me to count to 10, then count backwards from 10 to 0. I did it perfectly. I was to be a problem solver, yet a little later I would become a problem causer. And this title seemed to fit me, contributing to the future profits of fate. All those gifts I had no clue I was given were now dregs of shadow and bone, numbers ripening into something long-lipped and faulty, my nature of inspiration like a spritzer, drooling in the profane while my castle crumbles, unremembered, the teacher proctor in ruins. But I was alive and loved. Wasn't that the gift itself? Thank you.
This is our senior project film, Rerouted, and we are Pixels in Motion. Rerouted is a 3D animated short that follows Alex, a college student begrudgingly pursuing the field of medicine, who has a secret love for art. However, his mother is vehemently against the arts and deeply hopes for her son's success in the field of medicine. Alex must cope with the high expectations set for him by his mother and the immense workload that comes with college life, to decide whether he wants to pursue his love for art or stick with his predetermined path. We think this fits the momentous theme because Alex has to make a crucial decision during his confrontation with his mother.
Hey, I'm Jeff Nelson, and my focus was audio.
Hi, I'm Chase Levine, and my focus was environment creation.
Hi, I'm Caleb Tompkins, and my focus was rigging.
Hi, I'm Marlena Doherty, and my focus was character design.
Hi, I'm Tyrone Bullock Jr., and my focus was animation.
Hi, I'm Sarah Boise, and my focus was animation.
Hi, I'm Tyler Singson, and my focus was lighting.
Hi, my name is Kim Doe, and I focused on video editing.
We are Pixels in Motion. Enjoy!
Let's give another round of applause to Maya and Pixels in Motion. Super exciting talks, amazing artwork. Guys, this marks the end of our first session. With this, I would ask you guys to proceed to the lobby. The workshop session starts now till 12. And I encourage you guys to engage with our speakers in their table setup. And right after the workshop at 12, our lunch break starts. Food is already served, so please help yourself. If you need recommendations, ask us. We'd be happy to help. We will be starting our second session exactly at 1 p.m. Please arrive on time, as we will not allow people to enter during the talks. Thank you so much.
Hi everyone, and welcome back to our second session of the day, Discovery. Today, to kickstart the session, we have Drexel's very own Product Design Program Director, Schaar. Raja's expertise in ethical design and technology complements her wide array of research interests very well. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Schaar.
Am I wrinkled? Hello. Thank you so much for having me here today. I'm really excited to share my talk with you. For those of you who've ever seen me speak before, you know that I like to talk about television and usually food, and today is no different. I want you to sit with me for a second in a moment that is in our past. So, I'm going to talk about several things today. One of is a moment that is not my own. They actually belong to some other people, but there are several moments that I think that will all come together and make sense. So, everyone, we're going on a journey. We're actually traveling through time. So, hop in your time machines with me. Everybody have a time machine? Right? Your imagination, your memories. And really cool time machines like, I don't know, the internet, or books, movies, or my favorite, which is TV. So, let's journey on back. And can I get the slides? They're not advancing. Hello? Sorry, pause. We're pausing on our journey. We're still journeying. We're still journeying. There we go. The updated ones. There you go. Oh, okay. All right, so we're still on our journey. Actually, these are not the updated slides. Sorry, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. These are not the slides. The updated ones. Yeah. Okay. Hold on one second. Okay, go do that one. Yeah, very cool. Good. We're going to use my mic.
Yeah. Okay. Hey guys, we have had a technical difficulty, so we're going to do our second speaker first. Adit, are you around? Okay, we'll locate our second speaker and we'll do that first while we get this fixed.
I have my slides right there. Let me just grab them.
All right, thank you guys. Thank you for being patient with us.
Sorry, I'm done. There we go. I updated it right before we went to lunch. Or to the workshops. No.
Because this is the latest I got.
It has 2 black slides at the beginning.
Why do I not have this?
I don't know. Oh, is your computer on the internet right now? Is your computer on the internet right now? Is it on the internet?
Yeah, it is. I think you need to send it to me again.
Oh, just click on that link again. You have to Don't go to the link. Go to the link instead.
Let me just check it.
If you just go to the link, it's two black slides at the beginning.
Can you find out? Yeah, it's right here. How about you do an intro? Yeah. And
all right, cool.
I'll try to set it up. Give it a few minutes.
Yeah. I updated it right before I went to the workshop.
Attachment in an email. That's what happened here. So thanks for being patient. We'll move on to our next exciting speaker. I'll have Utsav, one of our team members, introduce. Let's get started with the conference again. Utsav, would you like to come on the stage?
Hi everybody, I'm Utsav and I'm excited to be here on stage as part of the TEDx Curation team. Next up on stage is Adit Gupta. Adit has achieved and keeps on achieving great heights with Ullah and his entire startup business is, it's connecting convenience stores with delivery services. When he's not raising millions of dollars, Adit focuses on his PhD at CCI, and he's focusing on artificial intelligence as well as human-computer interaction. One of the most interesting things about Adit is that he has built many businesses throughout his student life, and he keeps on doing that. And he has failed in a lot of them, and he's going to talk about them today. Please join me in welcoming Adit Gupta to stage, everybody.
Hello, everyone. My name is Adit Gupta, the co-founder and CEO of Ullah, and I'm so excited to be talking to you, everyone, today. We're going to talk about failure and the importance of failure. But first of all, raise your hands if you failed. Yep, I failed. You failed. Literally everyone here has failed. At some point, whether it's been a small failure or a large failure, whether it's failing a class or failing to take an opportunity, we've all failed. So we've all been here. This is a common ground that we can start with. Growing up, we're actually taught not to fail. We're taught that it's bad to fail. We're taught that we should actually play it safe. And we're actually taught that if you go above and beyond and fail, that's disastrous. You should never do that. And what this actually does is it limits our abilities to go above and beyond and reach our fullest potentials. And because of that, we have actually become so accustomed to not wanting to fail that we don't take chances, but other people do. People like Elon Musk. Elon Musk is someone that was at SpaceX, and they failed multiple times. Their rockets blew up. They literally blew up billions of dollars to fail. And then the very last time, they put their entire capital, everything for that last time, this was it. And before you know it, they had achieved vertical landing for their Falcon ship. That has revolutionized how we actually do space travel. Another example of overcoming great failure is with someone that we all know, Bill Gates. We all know of Bill Gates as the genius that dropped out of Harvard to start Microsoft. But did you know he actually started TrafoData? It was a company to provide traffic data to traffic engineers that could actually make traffic less congested. And this was a huge failure. Their software never worked. It never could achieve great success. And it's because the computing infrastructure at the time was so archaic, it didn't allow innovators like Paul Allen and Bill Gates to be able to build software. And that was seminal in their decision to starting operating systems in Microsoft to enable other software engineers to build applications. Now, last but not least, I'd love to share a story of someone that we all know, Jim Carrey. Raise your hand if you've seen a Jim Carrey movie. We've seen him in The Yes Man. We've seen him across other movies like Ace Ventura and other movies where Jim Carrey has made us all laugh. But did you know that Jim Carrey has decades of experience with failure? When Jim Carrey was younger, he had an undiagnosed case of dyslexia, and it caused him to fail a lot in school. When he went on to make his acting career a reality, he failed dozens and dozens and dozens of times, and he actually almost quit and became a janitor to actually live in a tent. He had to overcome extreme poverty to get to his one point of time where he actually overcame that failure. And now we get to watch him in Sonic the Hedgehog in the theaters. We all experience failure, but the problem is that we don't do anything about it. We don't have a framework of going through failure. And that's actually why I'm here today. We are actually going to talk about failure as it comes to my personal life. Why I'm here talking about failure is because I've had a big friendship with failure over the last decade. When I was in college, I wanted to be an RA. And as an RA, I would get to live on campus and have an amazing experience. But what ended up happening was I applied and failed. This was a 4-month process. And I got that email 8 o'clock in the morning on a Monday saying, "We're sorry, but this was a very competitive process. Please try again next year." So I did. Next year, I tried again and applied to be an RA. And I had studied for this. I talked to other RAs. I knew exactly what to do. And so the day that the decisions came out, I got that same email again at 8 o'clock. "We're sorry, this was a really competitive process." So 3rd time's the charm. I apply again, and before you know it, I failed again. I got that same stupid email that said, "We're sorry, this was a very competitive process." And so that evening, on my train ride back home, I had met a gentleman where out of nowhere, he initiated a conversation, and I found out he was a director at the International House of Philadelphia. And my first question to him was, "Are you guys looking for RAs?" And before you know it, I was an RA at the International House of Philadelphia and continued to be one for years to come. And later in my undergraduate career, I started my first company, Vibe. We spent about 3 years building this company, building the product, and after launching it, to our surprise, only a few people downloaded it. And to our demise, none of them came back to the app after downloading it. So now you have millions of lines of code that we worked on, dragged and dropped to the trash can. Last but not least, when my company was shutting down, so was the whole world. We all experienced COVID. A lot of us experienced failure. And when that happened, we saw an opportunity to help mom and pop merchants that weren't able to deliver. They were failing to deliver to people that wanted things on companies like Uber, DoorDash, et cetera. And so we built Ullah. 2 years into this business, we've generated millions of dollars worth of venture capital. We've generated a ton of revenue. We've expanded to 50 cities around the country. But what most people don't know is we had to hear about 600 no's from people that didn't believe in the idea, from people that thought this would fail when the pandemic stopped. And we continue to hear no's all the time. So the idea is that we all will experience failure no matter where we are in life, and this is completely normal. So with that experience with failure, it's an honor to introduce you with the FAIL framework. And what the FAIL framework actually stands for, gave away the surprise, it's find. When you're in a stage of failure, first thing you'll want to do is actually find all of the causes of what caused the failure. In the experience of Vibe, a great experience over 3 years, which ended up failing, we found all the clues from advisors, friends, investors, folks that said no, wrote down data points. And in your lives, when you go through failure, try to get data points of why you failed. The next thing you'll want to do is avoid bad habits, because when you're actually failing or you're going through a bad failure, research indicates that's when you may pick up bad habits. And so what you can do to avoid that is actually pick up good habits. When my company ended, I started running almost every morning, amongst other good habits, like reading, talking to founders ahead of me, where I could learn from their experiences. The third thing you can do is actually introspect. So now that you have good habits going for you, now that you have a lot of data of why you failed, what you can do is introspect and understand how you can change your trajectory to steer your ship in the right direction. You may want to change internal or external factors, bring on more mentors. This introspection could be a sense of the 5 whys theory. Really dig into why you failed. Why did I fall down? My shoes were untied. Why were my shoes untied? Because I was too lazy to tie them, and so on. Lastly, what you'll want to do is let go. When we have failure, we keep failure. We don't tell failure. But you know what you should do? You should actually write a blog. You should tell your friends. You should tell your colleagues. You should build a framework of how you failed, why you failed, and how you're going to actually not fail again. So in my personal life, we applied this FAIL framework at Vibe, and we continue to apply it at my current company. Failure is one of our core values at Ullah. We ask folks to make mistakes. We ask them to understand the mistakes they're making, document them, and share them, and be proud of the mistakes they made. And it's become a core identity of our culture in our organization. And as such, you can take this FAIL framework and make it a core identity of how you overcome failure in your professional lives and your personal lives. So with that, I'd like to conclude by saying we're all going to fail at some point. Raise your hands if you think you're going to fail at something. At some point. All of us, including me. But don't let that failure slow you down. Decompose that failure into tangible next steps of how you can improve, get up faster, because at the end of the day, when you go through failure, failure doesn't define you, but going through failure makes you better at failing. So you'll remember the FAIL framework. Thank you.
Thank you, Adit, for teaching us that we all have failures and failures that we have to overcome. I mean, we do all fail. TEDx's most recent failure being our technology issues today, but we get past it. So please welcome Raja Schaar back on the stage. Thank you.
Yeah. All right, I'm back. Hello. All right, we're still going on a journey. We're still traveling through time. We're going back and rewinding that moment where my file wasn't on the thing and also the dates weren't even showing up because the font was wrong. So welcome to 1966. What you're seeing before you is a glowing screen on a small box. There's a small girl. She has dark skin and dark hair, and she is looking at the TV with rapt attention. She runs through the house and says, "Mama, there's a black lady on TV, and she ain't a maid." That woman was Whoopi Goldberg. She's an EGOT winner. That means Emmy, Tony, Grammy, Oscar, talk show host, actor, comedian, and also Texas Guinan on Star Trek: The Next Generation. And one of my favorite characters in the series. This moment for Whoopi Goldberg is the moment that I'm not actually is going to be my big moment, but one of those moments that leads us to a huge moment in our world. Imagine having grown up your entire life and never having seen yourself reflected on television. Or when you saw someone who looked like you, they were always in a role that you didn't recognize. Imagine never seeing yourself in the future. When Whoopi recounts this moment, when she's traveled through time, 300 years into the future, we were only 100 years after the end of slavery in the United States. So when we want to think about what was happening in 1966, so the world as we knew it was not the world that we are in now. We're talking about a world that's about 20 years after World War II, approximately thereabouts, during which we exterminated 6 million Jews. This country interred 100,000 Japanese Americans. We're in a moment at the height of the civil rights movement where Black people are struggling and fighting for their lives and their very freedoms that we have today, that we still continue to fight for. We're in a moment in time where we're in a battle with Russia for the space race, but also it's the height of the Cold War. So in 1966, this is the context in which I want you to imagine sitting in front of your television and watching and seeing someone on screen. And what does she see? This is the cast and crew of the USS Enterprise, or you might know them as Star Trek, right? You got Captain Kirk, you got Spock, you got Scotty. But she looked past all those people because she was dead set on seeing someone who looked like her. But I want to tell you about a few of the other people on this crew. See, Gene Roddenberry decided to make Star Trek as this optimistic, diverse look at the future where we were free to look and wrestle with socio-political issues that we were facing today. But he put it in a future where people existed, and the diversity of the people represented here cannot be discounted. So, now the font's messed up, so you have to just ignore that part. But not only is there people from Georgia, I'm from Georgia, by the way, we got folks from Scotland. Okay, pretty cool. Leonard Nimoy is an American Jew descended from the Ukraine. Chekhov was from Russia. Lieutenant Sulu, Japan. George Takei, who played Lieutenant Sulu on the show, was interred at the age of 5 in the Japanese internment camps here in the United States. We also have people from the USA. That is the United States of Africa, folks. And who was from there? Well, probably you could take a guess. It was that woman, Nichelle Nichols. She played Lieutenant Commander Uhura, the communications officer of the USS Enterprise. 4th in command. You've never seen yourself in the future. You've never seen anyone who looks like you, and there she is. That moment was the moment that changed what I would call the future of the way that we see ourselves here and the future that we know that we want to fight and strive for. Because as N.K. Jemisin says, who misses what they've never imagined? But now we had a vision in which to imagine and aspire to. So we're going to get in our time machines again, and we're going to fast forward 20 years into the future. It's 1987, and there's a little brown girl with brown skin and black hair sitting on her mom's bed with her sisters, and we're watching Star Trek: The Next Generation. And what do I see on the screen? Whoopi Goldberg standing behind a bar as Texas Guinan, telling James T. Kirk, telling Jean-Luc Picard to get over it. This idea that I took for granted, that we had fought so long just to be seen on screen as we were, but I could be in that moment and I could see myself in a way that didn't inspire the same sort of awestruckness that Whoopi did. What it did was just confirm what I already knew, was that I mattered and I belonged. Also on that show was LeVar Burton. As you all may know him as the guy from Reading Rainbow, but I also knew him as Geordi, with the bionic eyes, with the banana combs. Anybody else from the 80s walk around with banana combs on your face when you were Geordi, right? All right, so, we travel through time with our imagination and our memories, but we also can travel with books. And I find that there's, even as much as I love television, there's no amount of time that you can take that will replace the 2 seconds it takes to transform you to another place, another planet within 2 seconds when you open a page. So thank you, LeVar Burton. So when I think about this, when I think about the role of science fiction, it's because it allows us to dream. It allows us to imagine possibilities in ways that we can wrestle with as both optimistic and pessimistic, right? So let's go back to 1967. Star Trek has just wrapped its first season. And Nichelle Nichols had the opportunity to pursue her dream career. I don't know if you realize this, but there wasn't science fiction TV shows as a job back in the day before when Nichelle was growing up. She aspired to be a dancer and a stage performer. She wanted to dance on Broadway. That was her dream. And she finally had a chance to do it. So she walks into Gene Roddenberry's office and she quits the show. Thank you very much. This has been great, but I have a dream job offer. See you later. She takes off and goes that weekend to a fundraising dinner for the NAACP. At the dinner, one of the organizers walks up to her and says, "Hi, Miss Nichols, sorry to disturb you, but one of your fans is here and would really like an autograph." And she goes, "That's nice," thinking it's some Trekkie, but that person will have to wait because I would like to talk to Dr. Martin Luther King, who's standing right behind you. And he walks up to her, and if you know this story, shut up, don't say anything. Don't spoil it for anyone. He walks up to her and he says, "I'm your biggest fan. My family are your biggest fans. Your TV program is the only TV program that allowed my kids to stay up late and watch." And so they have a conversation in which he thanks her for being on the show, and they talk about the show. And at the end of it, she goes, "Well, I'm so glad that you enjoy it so much, but I'm leaving the series." And this is the actual moment that I wanted to talk to you all about today. Because this moment right here is the reason that I'm here today. Martin Luther King Jr. tells her that she has to stay on the show as an act of activism. Because what she represented that no one else had been able to do in the first place was show that there are Black people in the future. And so when I think about that moment, I'm so grateful that she decided to stay and she decided to defer her own dreams in order to become an activist for space, diversification of space in STEM. From 1967 to 1968, 10 years later, Nichelle Nichols at this point had left the show. The show ended in 1969, and she had continued. She started her own STEM company that was about bringing women into the fold, and she was on the board of NASA, and I'm sorry I'm crying, it just makes me so happy. In 1977, NASA decided to start their space shuttle program. They were sending humans into space. And they noticed that all of their applicants were largely male and largely white. And they had a problem. And so they asked Nichelle what they should do about it. And she said, "Well, you should do these things." And they were like, "You should do those things." And she was like, "Okay, I will." 4 months later, their applicant pool went up from, I think it was 1,000 to 8,000 total. The number of women that applied, the overall is 1,500 to 8,000. The number of women that applied, 100. After 1,600, over 1,600 women applied. Before, minorities, 35. After 1,000 applicants. She's single-handedly responsible for recruiting, and I'm sorry the formatting of this is messed up, but Guion Bluford, who is from Philadelphia. He graduated from Overbrook High School. He was the first Black man in space. We have Sally Ride, the first LGBTQ and woman in space. We have Mae Jemison, the first Black woman in space. We have Ellison Onizuka, who is a Japanese descendant and a Japanese American, who again, remember, these are people who had been living a life that was of oppression and of lack of recognition. These are people who did not see a future for themselves, and especially here in this country. And these are some of the people who established what we know of as our space program today. Allison Judy Resnick, the first Jewish person in space, and Ronald McNair, he was actually the third African American in space, all perished on the Challenger space shuttle. She single-handedly recruited and mentored these people into our space program. So when I think about her kind of inspiration, it's really, hers is a moment of transformation. She transformed the STEM field, which I think largely influences and is really embedded with the design field. She inspired Afrofuturist visions from writers and movie producers like N.K. Jemisin and Octavia Butler. This is what N.K. Jemisin has to say about the future. First of all, we all get to dream. We all have futures. We all have pasts. We all have stories. And we all, every single one of us, no matter who we are and no matter what's been taken from us, what poison we've internalized or how hard we've had to work, expel it. Octavia Butler says, what good is science fiction's thinking about the present, the future, and the past? What good is its tendency to warn or consider alternative ways of thinking and doing? What good is its examination of the possible effects of science and technology, or social organization and political direction? At its best, science fiction stimulates imagination and creativity. It gets its reader and writer off the beaten track, off the narrow footpath of what everyone is saying, thinking, and doing, whoever everyone happens to be this year. What good is all that to Black people? It's everything. And that brings us to our present. So I found a career in industrial design. And for those of you that don't know, industrial design is a design process that's focused on the design of goods. We consider it a strategic problem-solving process that's really about improving people's lives. And we really are about creating an optimistic and profitable future. But to me, that word future holds a lot of meaning. I'm the program director of the product design program here at Drexel University, and I have the privilege of leading a group of students through a curriculum where they get to learn and think about what that future might hold through the lens of design. And that, to me, is a huge responsibility. Because as Octavia Butler says, all that you touch, you change. And all that you change, changes you. The only lasting truth is change. God is change. And so I take my responsibility very seriously. I focus on transforming our world through the lenses of social justice, climate change, and STEAM education and design. And with great power comes great responsibility. Probably Ben Parker, I don't know, right? So I take that responsibility into my scholarship and research. I've been able to collaborate on projects focused on climate futures, as well as thinking about what that future might look like for young Black girls who look like me through my program called Black Girls Singing Through Dance. And so when I think about this sense of what the future might hold and what it might bring to us, I think about these moments where people decided to sacrifice their own dreams in order to set a stage so that future generations can benefit and grow. So my question to you is, what moment will you defer so that you can hold a space for others so that they may also live long and prosper?
One more time. Such a compelling talk. It's my pleasure to introduce you guys to Drexel football team, Drexel's student-run, award-winning improv group. So let's hear it for them.
Ladies and gentlemen, Drexel football team. Thank you, guys. We have our second workshop session happening right now. If you would like to participate, please exit the hall and engage with our speakers in the lobby. We also have a charcuterie board. If you exit from the gate right here on my right, you'll be able to enjoy this. I feel like in the last lunch session, people didn't finish, so go have at it. All right. Bye-bye.
Hi everyone, we're moving into our third and final session, which is reflection. Our first speaker will be Nadia Jagessar. When I first heard that Nadia would be speaking today, I was really excited. A couple months into the pandemic, Indian matchmaking graced our screens with its culture-filled, fun, and modern take on love. Nadia, to me, shone on screen with her respect to her heritage and her honest approach to finding love. Let's welcome her onto stage.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. Before we dive in, I invite everyone to close your eyes. And collectively, we'll take a big inhale in and out. And one more in and out. Now, with your eyes closed, I invite you to engage your senses. What can you hear? The sound of my voice, your cell phone vibrating, the sound of the air conditioning unit. What can you taste? The lunch you just had, a coffee as a pick-me-up, maybe some gum to mask that lunch. But more importantly, what can you smell? Perfume or cologne you sprayed this morning, fabric softener clinging to your clothes, or maybe your neighbor's breath from the lunch they just ate. And with your eyes closed, I invite you to change the world around you. I ask that you think back to a fond moment, a core memory as the kids are calling it these days. In this moment, what do you see? What can you hear? What can you taste? And more importantly, what can you smell? With a big, deep breath in, inhale that moment, and exhale. I'd like you to keep focus on that moment and slowly open your eyes. Under your chairs, you'll find a blotter dipped in fragrance. Feel free to smell this as much or as little as you'd like during our time together. I started in the fragrance industry about 10 years ago, and I had no idea what I was walking into. There's an entire industry built subtly under our noses, from laundry detergents to air fresheners, fabric softener, candles, to even garbage bags and cat litter, and of course the very obvious, perfumes. But scent is so much more than that. Neuroscientists suggest that our sense of smell is most closely linked to memory. This is believed to be because of the close connection between the amygdala, which is the area in the brain responsible for emotion, and the hippocampus, the area associated with memory. These memories, our odor-driven memories, are the ones that are most likely childhood memories. These are the years where we experience most smells for the first time. These are imprinted into our brains and can be vividly recalled at the first sign of something that's familiar. In the industry, brands strive to find that balance between nostalgia and imprinting smells to help drive long-lasting purchase. When they're able to find this balance, these standout fragrances, we call them blockbusters. But no blockbuster fragrance is created overnight. It's the work of perfumers who continuously make modifications, changes and modifications to the top, middle, and dry down notes of a fragrance, either based solely on the perfumer's inspiration and creativity or from feedback from the client. What I think is so special about fragrance is that two people can experience fragrance very differently. So if you and the person sitting next to you smell the same fragrance, you can have two very different reactions to it. In the fragrance composition, we have the top, middle, and dry down notes. So our top notes are the notes that you experience first. They're the profile of the fragrance, but they quickly flash off. So I grew up in a pretty small white American town, and I was one of the only few people of color in my school. I tried so hard to fit in, all while trying to make sure that I controlled how people perceived me. I did sports all year round. I joined various clubs. I tried to look like the girls around me, sound like the girls around me, dress like the girls around me, all while trying my hardest to hide my life outside of school. This is assimilation at its finest. In high school, at this time in high school, assimilation to me smelled like Victoria's Secret Love Spell. If you did not have a bottle of Victoria's Secret Love Spell in your tote bag, you were not it. I remember walking around, spraying the fragrance before class, before lunch when I knew I was going to see a lot of people, after school, anytime I felt like I needed to fit in. Only my closest friends knew that I took Indian dance classes multiple days a week. I never had my mom make curry before my friends came over because I was embarrassed by how it made our house smell. Even though my house didn't smell like everybody else's, but it was mine. It was really exhausting to compartmentalize like that. And so I modified. In the fragrance pyramid, the middle notes appear shortly after the top notes have receded. Middle notes make up about 70% of the aroma of a fragrance, and it's known as the heart of the fragrance. Now, before I go any further, think back to your core memory that we just brought to our attention. Were you able to remember where you were, who you were with, what you were wearing, what you heard, what you tasted? But more importantly, were you able to remember what you smelled in that moment? For me, a lot of my core memories were in my family kitchen with my mother. I couldn't tell you what I was doing, what I was wearing, what we talked about, maybe who else was there, but I can tell you there was a lot of delicious food. So my family is Indo-Caribbean, specifically Guyanese, and Guyana is a small country in South America that was colonized by the British and later became independent in 1966. My ancestors are South Asian, but Guyana is home to folks that have come from all over the world: India, Africa, China, Portugal, just to name a few. Our ancestors brought with us their religion, culture, language, food, anything they could, but they tried their hardest to preserve it with what little freedom they had. And so when it came to food, they had no choice but to cook with the ingredients that were there. So the chicken curry that they ate in the motherland was not the same as what they ate in Guyana. The ingredients were different, the water was even different. And so that's the recipe that was passed down to my mother that we continue to eat now. I could be anywhere in the world, and once that combination of spices hits my nose, it takes me right back home. Home to the place where I've had my deepest thoughts, where I've laughed until I cried and cried until I healed. Home to the place where my mother continues this tradition of cooking and tries to get me to do the same, but let's face it, I don't cook. And so I modified. When we get to the base of our fragrance, or the dry down notes, these are the notes that really anchor the scent and are the longest lasting. So it wasn't until after college that I decided to start showing a little bit more of my life with my friends. I shared soca music with them, I invited friends to family parties, and I really started speaking up about all the similarities that Indo-Caribbeans had to our South Asian counterparts. Fast forward 8 years, I got an email about an audition for an Indian dating show. Now, I'm a try everything once kind of person, and I was like, I tried every other form of dating very unsuccessfully, so I had nothing to lose by sending in my profile. As I went through each step in the audition process, I started each call by declaring, I'm Guyanese, I'm not Indian. I didn't want the casting director or anyone else to think that I wasn't being authentic or that I was trying to be something that I'm not. And so round after round I went, making sure I declared this statement. And then I finally got the call that we were going to start filming. And so I took all of these dates as opportunities, the chance to meet my future husband. And so I prepared for these dates no differently than any other date. The cameras really didn't mean anything to me. So I picked out my cutest outfits, did my hair and makeup, made sure my accessories were on point, and I topped it all off with a spritz of my favorite date perfume. This was the perfume that I earmarked that made me feel the sexiest and most confident in my skin. And so regardless of who was sitting across from me, I walked into every date smelling exactly the same. About a year and a half after we began filming, Indian matchmaking debuted on Netflix in 150 countries and completely changed my life. And so I modified. In the weeks following the debut of the show, I realized the impact that my presence had on the show. It was in these moments that I realized I represented an entire diaspora. Years of telling people why I looked Indian but wasn't, my story was finally out there for everyone to see. I represented those who were struggling with cultural identities, where they lived versus where they came from. Those whose families had left India and settled anywhere else in the world, in Fiji, in South Africa, in Europe, and even in the Caribbean. And so in those following weeks, I still showed up every day to my fragrance job while I was living on cloud 9, experiencing all of the hype around the show. It wasn't until that moment in my fragrance job that I realized I had created a blockbuster fragrance, and it was me. The fragrance blotter that you have in your hand is a symbol of that, a symbol of me, a symbol of you, and all of our stories. It started when I first sprayed it, it smelled one way, when you first smelled it initially, and if you smell it again in a little bit, it's going to smell later. The beauty of all of this is that it's stayed the same. It's always been that same fragrance as it continues to evolve. And so it was in that time that I knew standing in my own power at my core is how the greatest opportunity of my life so far came to be, because I owned that. No one has my modifications, no one has my experiences or unique notes, and the same goes for you. It's so easy to be labeled as one way or another by individuals who judge us based on our top and middle notes, but at the end of the day, you are the blockbuster of your life. No one has your modifications or your unique fragrance notes or your experiences. So I ask you, when you have a second, stop and smell the roses, because it could be in those moments that your life begins to bloom. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. My name is V, and I'm the Director of Finance at TEDxDrexelU. Thank you, everyone, for being here. So coming up next, I would like to introduce Dr. Ebony White. Ebony is a mental health counselor and a clinical assistant professor at Drexel University. So her research focused primarily on advocacy and social justice within the African American community. So her talk today is titled, You Don't Get to Name Me, in which she'll be using her own personal story to embrace different aspects of identity. So please be mindful that any type of photography or videography is not allowed during the talk. So thank you, and now please welcome Dr. Ebony White on the stage.
Hey. All right, yes. So, tell me, what's more important? How others view you or how you view yourself? Okay. So the most common or socially acceptable response seems to be how you view yourself, of course. But is it our own perceptions that determine our trajectory, or is it the perceptions of others? When I thought about this talk, Momentous, the first thing that came to mind was being the first African American to earn a PhD from the program that I earned my doctorate degree from, and the first in my family line to achieve this accomplishment. And on my degree are written these words: rights, privileges, responsibilities appertaining thereto, right? And I didn't really think about those words at all, because all I was thinking is, I'm a doctor now, put some respect on my name. And so, but what I noticed was that once people learned that I had a PhD, that they started to act differently around me. They started to defer to me, and become super accommodating. And I was like, oh, those rights and privileges appertaining thereunto. And then when they find out that I'm also a licensed professional counselor, a mental health counselor, they ask me for a diagnosis for themselves, or for a friend, their parents, that's common, or even colleagues. And the funny thing is, most of the times when I'm responding to people, I don't even talk about any type of educational training or expertise. Most of the time, how I'm responding to people is based on my embodied experience. And so that brought me back to the question, what is more important or more impactful or more significant? How others view me or how I view myself? When I was completing my dissertation, I did it on how African American women in the US view success and how to attain it. Overwhelmingly and unsurprisingly, they talked about the 3 F's: formal education, family support, and faith. But what was surprising is they also talked about something that's called controlling images. And so what are controlling images? They are these caricatures that were developed for Black women, and they came out of the slavery era, and they were designed to basically pigeonhole or solidify Black women's position at the bottom of the social hierarchy. They were a naming and a labeling, and the participants in my study were overwhelmingly talking about their influence on their lives. Whether explicitly or implicitly, they spoke about navigating these images. Sometimes their behavior was solely based on others or society's subscription to these images. And so what does that look like? For example, one of my participants said, at work, I don't even correct people on the pronunciation of my name because I don't want to be seen as an angry Black woman and then have to suffer the consequences of that perception. Another participant talked about not having time to be depressed because her family was depending on her to take care of them. And then sadly, one of the surprises that came from my dissertation was that many of my participants had been molested as girls. And they talked about being really mindful of their bodies and attire to try to minimize the opportunity for harm. Now we know that racial stress and discrimination negatively impacts mental and physical health. This is something that we all know. We know that experiences of continued discrimination leads to stress, increased blood pressure, substance use, and mental health issues such as depression and anxiety. Yet, we continue to engage in behaviors that perpetuate a cycle of suffering and an expectation of toughing it out. Not only that, these women were very aware of these images and these expectations that others had of them, but also, they also internalized those images for themselves. Think about that. That the very thing, on one hand, I'm saying, no, this is not what I am. On another, I feel like this is who I am because I've been called it for so long, and so I have to act accordingly. And so, although these conversations with these women happened years ago now, right? I'm not going to tell you how long because we don't tell our ages, but it happened years ago now. It greatly impacted me because I'm still talking about it. And I began to think about my own negotiation of these images. And the things that came to mind was that, there are many times where I would have been justified to respond in anger, but I didn't because I knew the consequences of that choice and how I would be perceived. Or for the academics in here, the many times where I really wanted to say, no, I don't have time to be on that committee or do that additional task, but instead I said yes, out of fear of retaliation, or how that no might impact my promotion or advancement in my career. And so even me having this knowledge explicitly, the very thing I was fighting against, I realized my behaviors that I was choosing was actually in response to these things. Which brings me to the momentous moment that I actually want to talk about today. So, picture it. It's 2020, and a lot is going down, right? I'm sitting at home this one particular weekend with my dog, Hines, and I can't turn off the TV. I'm unable to mute my social media notifications. And, my mental health, my emotional health is under attack. I get to work on Monday, virtually, of course, because at this point, everything was virtual. And I go into a meeting, and my colleagues are talking about regular, everyday things, like laundry and cleaning the house and grading papers. And I felt like I was in the twilight zone because I'm sitting at my screen immobile, literally feeling trauma in my bones. And I realized in that moment that this space will always render me invisible. That no matter how well I spoke, I was still invisible in this space. That PhD that I'm so proud of did not make me more visible. Wearing suits did not make me more visible. Code switching, it did not make me more visible. And that realization was momentous. Now, before I tell you about my response to what happened, I first want to tell you a story. It's a story about an elephant and a giraffe. So, I didn't write this story. It's written by R. Roosevelt Thomas, and you can find it in the book, Building a House for Diversity. But it's one of my favorite stories that I use as a teaching tool. And it goes a little something like this. All right, so there's this giraffe who's a woodworker. And he's built this amazing giraffe house. So amazing that it got a national award. It was featured in the newspaper, and he is so proud of this house. One day, he's working in his garage, and he looks out, and he sees his friend, the elephant. The elephant is also a woodworker, and he invites him over. Well, the elephant tries to get in, but the doorway is tall and thin, and he can only get his head in the door. So the giraffe says, "Lucky for you, I have a latch here for my equipment." He flipped it so that the elephant could come in the house. When the elephant gets in the house, the giraffe has to take a call upstairs. Before he goes upstairs, the giraffe says to the elephant, make yourself at home. Cool. Before I continue, I want you to think about what it means to make yourself at home. So the elephant looks, he sees an unfinished project, and he says, oh, let me go check it out. He takes a step, and the floor starts to crunch. So then he says, whoa, I'll just go upstairs. He goes to go up the steps, and the steps crack, which startle him. So he jumps back, falls into the wall, and the wall crumbles. Giraffe comes down and says, what happened? And the elephant's response was, I was trying to make myself at home. The giraffe then looks around and says, I see the problem. And he starts to list things for the elephant to do. He says, go on a diet, take some exercise classes and lose weight, and take some ballet classes so that you're lighter on your feet. So he lists all these things so that the elephant could be comfortable in his house. And I think the elephant responds masterfully. The elephant looks at the giraffe and says, perhaps you're right. But maybe a house built for a giraffe can never really work for an elephant. And that sentiment describes exactly how I felt sitting in that moment, right? My colleagues, they were completely blind or oblivious to my experience because the house that was built was working perfectly for them. And interestingly enough, I felt like I'd done the metaphorical exercise and diets and ballet classes, and yet I still did not feel comfortable. And so that means that every time I spoke up and said something, to them it felt like I was trying to tear down their house. I was cracking their stairs and crumbling their walls. But not speaking up, not saying anything, tore at my soul, my very spirit. So, what did I decide to do? I decided that who I am, as I am, in this moment is enough. I decided that I was going to be authentically, unapologetically, and unabashedly myself. And now don't get me wrong, I understand the price of the toll that it takes to fight this battle on a regular basis. I completely get that. But by conforming, I was fighting another battle that I wasn't okay with. That I just simply wasn't okay with. And I decided, you know what? I could just go and do work with my community. But then that led to another issue. Because among the giraffes, I'm an elephant, but when I go back to my elephants, I smell like a giraffe. Right. And so the story that I told, it doesn't address that conundrum, right? It doesn't talk about the cost of conformity, the price of exceptionalism. It does not talk about the stripping of identities that sometimes occur when you're trying to survive in these spaces. It doesn't talk about how now there's a within group naming that happens where you are seen as out of touch or bougie, right? And that in your own community, that too hurts. And so the name of my dissertation, or the title of my dissertation, was Exceptional but Not an Exception, How African American Women Make Their Way. And what did I do? I decided to make my own way, as so many people have done before me. I've decided to teach the way I wanted to teach, right? Do research the way that I wanted to do research. And I moved now to this model of research that's really emancipatory. And I want to shout out my mentor, Dr. Sarisi West Olentuji. And I also do what I call FUBU research, for us, by us. And so I know I talked a lot today about my own experiences as a Black woman from the hood with a PhD, but I realized that this experience of navigating two spaces and not being fully accepted in either is not that unique of an experience. I'm thinking about the immigrant experience, the biracial or multiracial experience. I'm thinking about the Black queer experience, and so on and so forth. And so I want to end my talk today in two ways. First, with some instructions, all right? And then finally, I'm gonna end with one of my personal mantras, but I'm gonna ask you to do the personal mantra with me. So I'm telling you now so you can be ready, all right? So if you can relate to that experience, I'm gonna ask you to do three things. These are the instructions. Reflect, renounce, rejoice. Engage in some self-reflection about who you are, especially when people keep telling you who you are. Sometimes that takes a lot of work, right? I say to ask yourself what Fanon calls our central questions. Who am I? Am I who I say I am? And am I all I ought to be? And then I want you to renounce. No matter how far you go and what you achieve, there are going to be people that will try to name you. And I want you to say to them, you don't get to name me. I want you to reject it. Now, this is hard work, but it is rewarding work. And then finally, rejoice. My colleague Amira said the other day to be intentional about having a good day. She said, don't just expect a good day to happen to you. And so I'm going to tell you the same thing about joy. Don't just expect to find joy in the flowers and the trees and the grass, right? I want you to be intentional about creating joy, because joy is a way to resist, right? We need it to move forward. All right, so one of my personal mantras. I want you to repeat after me. Are you ready? Are you ready? Yes. All right, that sounded better. So it goes like this. I look in the mirror and I say, be mindful and be yourself. Be mindful and be yourself. Do your job and do you. Do your job and do you. Have faith and have a drink. Have faith, have a drink. Reach back while moving forward. Reach back while moving forward. See the moment and seize the moment. See the moment and seize the moment. And slaying is non-negotiable. And slaying is non-negotiable. Period.
Could we get another round of applause for Dr. Ebony White? I mean, come on, right? Awesome job. Thank you. Well, hi everyone. My name is Gabrielle Remo. I'm the marketing chair here at TEDxDrexelU, and I am so happy that each and every one of you are here today.
My name is Nithya Mehta, and I'm a member of the TEDxDrexelU team. So today we have the opportunity to hear one more incredible speaker, Dale Moss. Dale was on season 16 of ABC's dating show, The Bachelorette, and he was also a former football player.
Yep, but today he is a Drexel Dragon, which is so exciting. But that's not all. He's also a model, an actor, a host, and a global ambassador for the Special Olympics. I mean, what doesn't Dale do? So please join us in welcoming Dale Moss.
Check, mic check. Mic check. All right. How's everybody doing today? Doing all right? So this is the last convo, so hopefully we will close it out with a bang. And I'm Dale Moss, and I first and foremost want to thank you for allowing me to come here today and have this TED Talk. And it's all about momentous moments today. And for my conversation, I'm going to talk about how I've maintained my identity through the numerous momentous moments that have taken place in my life. And, you know, if I have to think about my first momentous moment, it actually takes place in prison. I was 8 years old. And in this momentous moment, I was visiting my father, Dale Sr. Now, my father struggled with heroin addiction and continued to struggle with drug and alcohol addictions for the first 20 years of my life. And, you know, I'm very thankful to say that, you know, for the last 13 plus years, he's been doing great. But I remember when I was riding with my mother to the prison, and we had this old busted up Cadillac DeVille that I absolutely hated. But, you know, I'm sitting with her in the car, and I tell her, I don't ever want to come up here again, because every time I looked at my father in the face, I saw myself, and I couldn't help but hear all the people who would tell me over and over again that you're going to wind up just like your father. Now, I also understood at a very, very young age that this image was becoming far too familiar. We were up at the prison so much, I knew every guard by name, and I knew all of the other inmates in the yard so well, it was as if they were uncles to me, quite honestly. So, you know, the day comes, and for whatever reason, even though I was extremely scared, I think I had enough courage, and I also understood my father very, very well. And we go into the visitation room, and I sit down and I look my father in the eyes, and I say, Dad, I'm not going to come up here anymore and see you while you're in prison. I love you, I support you, but this is not the life that I want, and it's too hard for me to see you in here. And my father would always tell me that regardless of the addictions and the struggles that he was going through, this life was not meant for me. And I know this is why he respected my decision. And, you know, I'm very, very thankful that I've had a family over time that has understood me and allowed me to, and supported me through moments like this. But this is the first moment in my life where I consciously was setting up a boundary to protect my identity and the trajectory of my life. And I did this in one of the most difficult circumstances because I was talking directly to my father. And by the way, I'm a junior, so I'm Baby Dale. That's Big Dale, and I'm Baby Dale. But I did this by eliminating an environment that I knew didn't serve me. And it's profound to think that at the age of 8, I had the awareness and to start forming my identity and also stand strong with the boundaries that I had set at that time. Now, in this story and what you're going to hear throughout the rest of this conversation is really 3 principles that have showed up within my life that have allowed me to maintain my identity through momentous moments. And I think it's fair to say that most people probably correlate a momentous moment with a positive experience, but it can in fact be during a traumatic or a negative time, which will also breed some of the biggest growth. And in the next phase of this conversation, you're going to hear me talk about managing environments. I'm also going to discuss the importance of your core values and staying true to those in opposition. And finally, it's going to be boundaries. And boundaries are some of the most difficult things to set, but they're so vital, and they've been so vital for me in different phases of my life. So we're in Philly. So where are my sports fans at? Obviously, sports fan, Eagles fans? Philly. Philly Dilly. Well, so I believe that some of you may have seen me on television. Obviously, we talked about that a little bit before. But well before I was on reality TV, I was an NFL wide receiver with the Green Bay Packers and the Chicago Bears. And sports, for me, meant so much more than just competition. Growing up in a biracial family that was extremely poor, sports provided a form of acceptance in a world where we very rarely were accepted, whether that was because of the color of our skin, the fact that we were extremely poor, and also in our community, the knowledge and understanding of the struggles that my father was going through. And sports had this unique way of breaking down a lot of those barriers. Sports honestly provided hope for me and my family, and it was a form of identity. Now, I was recruited for both basketball and football out of high school, and I eventually chose to play Division I basketball at South Dakota State University. And after a successful 4 years of basketball, I thought back to being recruited for football, and I had stayed in contact with the college football coaches, and they always wanted me to play both. And they said, hey, if you don't end up playing basketball professionally overseas and you want to come back to school, we'll have a scholarship for you. Well, I get to the end of my 4-year career in basketball. I have the opportunity to potentially play professional basketball overseas, which is something that I always dreamed of. But in the back of my mind, I could not get rid of the thought and the idea of thinking, what if? And even though people thought I was crazy, I hadn't touched a football in 4 years, I decided to come back to South Dakota State University and play football for 1 season. Now, I think it's important to think about like how many dreams never even get started because people are so afraid of the opinions of the outside world, or they're simply afraid of failing. And in this moment, not only did I make the team and not only did I play, but in my 1 season, I ended up leading our conference in receiving yards. And I put up numbers that would have put me in the top 5 receivers in school history in numerous categories. And this is what led to me signing a contract with the Green Bay Packers. And you think about, you know, a young black kid, South Dakota, poor family. This was the ultimate dream for me. I could legitimately provide for my family in a way that I never, ever could have imagined. This was the highest point in my entire life. And I think about that moment, and how much it meant to my family and my community. Well, 4 years in, I have an injury, I'm released from a team, and everything I had ever dreamed of stopped in an instant. And in this moment, I felt like I had failed my entire community. I felt like I had failed my entire family. And I think about everything that I had ever known. My identity for 26 years of my life as an athlete was completely gone. I went from this high point and I went to the lowest moment I had ever been in my life. But that moment right there was my momentous moment. And in that momentous moment, I knew that I had to reinvent myself. And in order to reinvent myself, I was going to have to change my environment because I could never be something that I wanted to be if I stayed in the environment I was in, which was South Dakota. I knew that life wasn't for me. So when everyone was telling me to give up my dream of professional sports, come back to South Dakota, and get a 9-to-5, what did I do? I upped and moved to New York City. And this is a city that I had never been in my life. This is a city where I had absolutely no family. But I knew there was opportunity there. And in my mind, I had already hit rock bottom. And I'm thinking, what else do I have to lose? If there's opportunity out there, I'm going to find it. Now, within 6 months, I had signed with one of the top talent agencies in the world in New York City, which led to a lucrative career as a model and also as a host. And this is something that I never could have imagined, and I never saw coming. And a little over a year from the moment that I moved out there, I was at the Super Bowl, except this time I didn't have cleats, I didn't have pads, but I had a microphone, and I was hosting during one of the biggest sporting events in the world. And, you know, I still think about that story and just how wild life is. But you'll also see in this moment, I had to change my environment in order to be something that I'd never been. And I went against the opposition on 2 occasions when I came back to school because I was following my truth. And also when I decided to completely change environments and go out to New York City. Now, I'm gonna go into one more story, and this one's like really, really interesting. But, you know, again, I think it's so important to understand and have some of these principles in place because everyone here who's in this audience has gone through transition. We've all questioned identity at some stage in our life, and there's so many people here at Drexel University who are ready to embark on a new chapter. And, you know, for my last story, I want to jump to 2020. Good old 2020. It was a year. And some of you may have seen me on a little show called The Bachelorette, which we talked about a little bit earlier. But for someone who's been so guarded and so private with his personal and family life throughout my entire life, going on one of the most widely viewed shows in the history of television for millions and millions of viewers to see your entire life was pretty daunting. And, you know, I'll be honest, I was probably the most secure that I've ever been at that point in my life. But in order to manage that and not lose yourself in that type of environment, it's extremely important that you set boundaries. And I think about going into the show, a way that I was able to maintain myself and not lose myself in that environment was by simply committing to not saying or doing anything that was outside of my character while I was on the show, because I didn't want anyone or anything or any edit to manipulate my character and try to portray me as something that I was not. And, you know, I feel really strongly about how that worked out and how that came out. But coming off the show was a completely different ballgame. And I think you try to prepare mentally for all these things that are going to come up in life, but I'll tell you, there's nothing that can prepare you for waking up one morning and being one of the most followed, the most covered, the most recognized people in the entire country, where social media, mainstream media is following each and every one of your moves. And not only that, but we were in a pandemic. So I think about the healthy environments that I had worked so hard to create were no longer existent. My friends and family were all isolated from one another. And there were times in which, you know, for the first time in my life, like, I felt extremely lost. I felt like I really had to find myself. And that's a moment when it's so important to do a deep dive and do a check-in, and I had to ask myself, like, who is Dale? Am I the same man? Am I really the man that I thought I was? And also, in that moment, you know, I had to ask myself ultimately what I was willing to sacrifice for happiness, and also what was going to make me happy. And when I honed in on that, I had to set the boundary, and I had to effectively, I had to set the boundary that anyone or anything that was in my life at that time that was negatively affecting it or taking away from my happiness and my family's happiness had to be eliminated for my mental health. And that was one of the hardest things that I've ever had to do, especially when a lot of those things went against the hopes and dreams of so many people in a public eye. And I think if I go through my momentous moments over and over again, these three principles would show up time and time again. And, you know, I want to take a couple seconds just to share with some of y'all in the audience ways that you can incorporate and set some of these boundaries to help you through some of these momentous moments or even some traumatic moments. And, you know, when you're setting a boundary, the first thing you have to ask yourself ultimately is, what do you want? Because you can't set a boundary if you don't know what you want. And then from that standpoint, if you set that boundary, you have to enforce it, because a boundary that isn't enforced means absolutely nothing. And then another thing is you have to reflect on the boundaries that you set, because what you might have set today is not going to necessarily be the same thing that you need or want a year down the road. And then finally, I think one of the best things you can do is ultimately simply work on saying no. So, you know, boundaries are so vital and so important in keeping us on track with who we are and who we want it to be. And, you know, one of my favorite quotes that I'll leave y'all with is simply, be yourself, because everyone else is taken. And I think that's something that a lot of us should hold true, stick to in today's day and age. So, you know, thank you so much for allowing me to be here and close out today's TEDx conference. This has truly been momentous, and that's all I got. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dale, for sharing your personal story with us and sharing all the different momentous moments in your life. That concludes our conference for today, and I want to thank you all so much for coming. As we can see from our dynamic speakers, our interactive workshops, and the entrepreneurial spirit of networking, momentous moments in our life can be a lot of things. They can be large, consequential actions or small, intimate moments, and we hope everything in this curated experience can help you pinpoint those in your own life. Today would not be possible without our amazing speakers, so a round of applause to them. And I wanted to take a moment to thank our sponsors. We had 3 sponsors today: the Drexel College of Medicine, the College of Nursing and Health Professionals, Live Well Collaboratory, and the College of Arts and Sciences. So thank you so much. I also wanted to give a giant shout out to our entire team. If you guys can join me up here. Everyone here has been working on this conference for about over a year now, trying to put all of this together, from working with vendors, curating speakers, securing the location with the alumni board during alumni weekend. So thank you so much, everyone, for working so hard. And we will end today with a networking session so we all can go out, talk about all the things we learn, interact with our speakers a little bit more. So once again, I want to thank you so much and helping us share ideas worth spreading. Have a good evening.